For almost 40 years, the Saab JS-39 Gripen lived in an unusual space within modern air power. It was respected for its engineering, appreciated for its cost efficiency, and praised by the pilots who flew it, yet it carried a burden that no amount of theory could remove. It had never been tested in a real, high-pressure conflict. Since the aircraft's first flight in 1988, analysts in NATO capitals, defense think tanks, and aviation circles kept returning to the same question. Could this Scandinavian lightweight truly survive the chaos of real war? Or was it destined to remain a backup option, clever, practical, but ultimately overshadowed by expensive giants like America's F-35 or Russia's Su-35? That uncertainty shaped the Gripen's reputation for decades. Military leaders admired its simplicity, its rapid turnaround time, and its ability to use roads instead of runways. But admiration is not the same as belief. Without proving itself under fire, the jet existed in a kind of strategic limbo. You might say it was a well-designed tool waiting for its first real test. Then, in July 2025, the waiting ended. In the heat and humidity of Southeast Asia, far from Scandinavia's frozen airfields, the question that had hovered over the Gripen for nearly 4 decades was finally answered. Between July 24th and July 28th, during a short but intense border conflict between Thailand and Cambodia, the Royal Thai Air Force deployed its Gripen fleet for the very first time in combat. What followed was a rapid sequence of precision strikes against Cambodian artillery positions near the contested Hu Makua Ridge and Tar Muan Temple. Laser-guided bombs hit their targets with remarkable accuracy, silencing batteries that threatened Thai ground forces. In just 5 days, the Gripen moved from an untested export aircraft to a combat-proven NATO standard fighter. And that shift, quiet on the surface, explosive in meaning, sent a ripple of unease through defense ministries across the world. A jet once seen as a budget alternative had now demonstrated real battlefield capability. How many countries suddenly began re-evaluating their assumptions? How many defense planners wondered whether they had underestimated Sweden's crown jewel? Yet the aircraft's successful debut is only part of the story. Behind the Gripen's sudden leap into global relevance stands something much larger: Sweden itself. For more than 2 centuries, Sweden sheltered under a doctrine of strict neutrality. It was a nation that avoided foreign entanglements, balanced relationships carefully, and shaped its identity around staying out of major conflicts. That entire worldview collapsed after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. A Europe that once believed in long-term peace was forced awake. As Finland applied for NATO membership, the Nordic balance shifted permanently, and Stockholm realized it could not remain isolated. Thus, in March 2024, Sweden joined NATO. The announcement may have appeared procedural to casual observers, but strategically it was one of the most dramatic realignments in Northern Europe since the end of the Cold War. Overnight, the alliance acquired not just a new member, but a nation with a strong defense tradition, a modern air force, and a strategic geography touching both the Arctic and the Baltic Sea. Sweden's accession closed a historic gap in NATO's northern shield. But what surprised analysts even more was Sweden's attitude after joining. One might have expected a cautious entry, gradual integration, limited commitments, time taken to adjust. Instead, Stockholm acted with speed that bordered on urgency. By September 2024, Sweden pledged 1,200 troops, 6 warships, and 24 fighter jets, nearly a quarter of its entire Gripen fleet, to NATO operations scheduled through 2025. For a nation newly aligned with the alliance, this level of involvement was astonishing. It suggested not just membership, but a determination to reshape the region's security architecture. Why did Sweden move so quickly? Why abandon centuries of neutrality with such commitment? Some argue it was fear, recognition that Russia's aggression would not stop at Ukraine. Others believe Stockholm saw an opportunity to take on a leadership role in Nordic and Baltic defense. And perhaps both are true. What is certain is that Sweden's actions have forced the rest of Europe to reconsider the strategic balance in the north. The Gripen's combat debut added an unexpected dimension to this transformation. For years, critics claimed the aircraft lacked credibility because it had never been tested under fire. Now that barrier has fallen. Sweden's Air Force, long admired for its efficiency and low operating costs, suddenly commands respect grounded in evidence rather than projections. And when a smaller nation demonstrates that a cost-effective fighter can perform as well as, or in some cases better than, much more expensive alternatives, it challenges conventional thinking. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Gripen story is how it reshapes perceptions of what modern warfare requires. Does a nation need the most expensive aircraft to win, or does it need platforms that are reliable, flexible, and adaptable? Countries like Colombia and the Philippines began asking these questions more seriously after the events of July 2025. Ukraine's government even hinted publicly that it hoped to receive Gripens in the future, a possibility that caused immediate anxiety in Moscow. If a fighter that once carried the stigma of being unproven can now be described as battle-tested, what does that mean for Europe's security landscape? How does it influence NATO's strategy? And what conclusions will Russia draw from this sudden shift? Sweden's rising profile complicates these questions further. Its defense spending has already reached 2.8% of GDP, with plans to climb to 3.1% by 2028, levels that rival the most committed NATO members. Its warships now patrol the Baltic under NATO coordination. Gripen stand ready on Polish runways. Swedish forces train in Arctic conditions alongside Norwegian, Finnish, and American troops. Every step Stockholm takes reinforces the perception that Sweden did not simply join NATO, it intends to help lead it. This raises a broader reflection. Is Europe witnessing the emergence of a new kind of military power? A nation that combines modest size, advanced technology, and strategic commitment in a way that amplifies NATO's northern strength? And if so, is this a development that reassures or unsettles you? As the Gripen's reputation changes, so does the role of the country that built it. Sweden, once defined by neutrality, now stands at the front of a rapidly evolving European security environment. And for many in Britain, especially those who lived through the Cold War, the sudden transformation of a long neutral state into a frontline NATO power may provoke both hope and concern. What does this shift mean for the balance of power in Europe? Is Sweden's rise a stabilizing force, or does it add a new layer of unpredictability? And most importantly, how should NATO respond to this new dynamic? What do you think? The comments are open. As Sweden settled into its new role inside NATO, questions about how its forces would operate under alliance command quickly turned into observable reality. One of the first signs came in March 2025, when 6 Gripen fighters were deployed to Malbork Air Base in Poland. This movement marked a historical moment, the first time Swedish combat aircraft flew operational patrols outside Swedish territory under NATO authority. For many observers, especially those in Britain who closely follow European defense matters, it was an unmistakable signal that Sweden's posture had fundamentally changed. From their new position in Poland, these Gripens conducted air policing missions over the Baltic, responding to Russian aircraft that tested the edges of NATO airspace. These encounters were not purely routine, they were part of an ongoing struggle for control of the skies in one of Europe's most sensitive regions. In September 2025, an incident captured international headlines when Swedish Gripens and German Eurofighters intercepted a Russian Il-20M reconnaissance aircraft that violated Allied airspace. Moscow expressed outrage, but the fact remained, Sweden was now actively shaping the tone of Baltic security. At sea, Sweden's involvement grew just as assertive. Its navy contributed 6 modern warships to NATO's Baltic Sea Fleet, reinforcing maritime choke points Russia depends on for access between Kaliningrad and St. Petersburg. For decades, that stretch of water had been an area where Russia assumed it held strategic freedom. Now, Swedish vessels, equipped with advanced sensors and long-reach missiles, added a new layer of difficulty for any Russian naval planning. One might ask, how does a former neutral state become central to a region's balance of power so quickly? It wasn't only about traditional military assets. Sweden also brought something unique: speed of innovation. In late 2025, Stockholm transitioned its Loki counter-drone system from prototype stage to battlefield deployment in only 84 days, a timeline almost unheard of in most Western defense industries. The system was sent to NATO bases in Poland, giving the alliance a rapid response tool against the same kind of drone tactics Russia had used in Ukraine. This shift didn't just strengthen NATO capability, it altered expectations. If Sweden could move this quickly, why couldn't larger nations with greater budgets do the same? Here again lies a question for British viewers familiar with decades of procurement delays. Does Sweden's approach highlight inefficiencies in other NATO members' defense systems? And what lessons, if any, should be drawn from this contrast? Yet perhaps the most profound transformation has been the effect Sweden's arrival has had on NATO's northern posture. Before March 2024, the alliance's northeastern flank, particularly the Baltic states of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, was often described as vulnerable. Their geography made them difficult to defend quickly in a crisis. But with Sweden and Finland joining the alliance, a previously exposed corridor has become a fortified arc stretching across the north. Instead of being surrounded, the Baltic states are now positioned between two strong NATO members, Finland to the east and Sweden to the west. This shift has enormous consequences for Russia. In any potential Baltic conflict scenario, Moscow would now face the possibility of a two-front operational challenge: Sweden's geography, its air bases, and its expanding surveillance powers significantly limit Russia's ability to control the Baltic Sea or exploit gaps in NATO airspace. This reality, combined with Sweden's decision to increase its defense spending to 2.8% of GDP, with plans for 3.1% by 2028, means that the northern flank is more militarized than at any point since the Cold War. Still, the most controversial development occurred in September 2025, when Ukraine's Deputy Defense Minister, Ivan Havrilyuk, told the BBC that Kiev expected to receive Swedish Gripens. The statement caused shockwaves not only in Russia, but across European capitals. Swedish officials later clarified that no such agreement had been finalized, but the strategic signal had already been sent. Even the possibility of Gripens entering the Ukrainian Air Force, whether during or after the war, was enough to unsettle Russian command planners. This rumors alone mattered. Sweden had already approved $214 million worth of Gripen spare parts in support of potential Ukrainian use. Although this did not guarantee immediate transfers, it indicated clear intent. Sweden was prepared to contribute meaningfully to Ukraine's long-term air power recovery. Such moves raised pressing questions. What would a Ukrainian air force equipped with modern Gripens mean for the balance of power along Russia's western borders? Would it force Russia to rethink its doctrine of air superiority in the region? For NATO, this dynamic created a form of strategic ambiguity. Sweden avoided direct confrontation by refusing to confirm immediate transfers. But the uncertainty forced Moscow to allocate resources and attention to a potential future threat. From a strategic perspective, this ambiguity is almost as powerful as the actual deployment of the jets themselves. It stretches Russian planning capacities, divides its air defense priorities, and complicates its long-term outlook. At the same time, Gripens continue to fly NATO missions over the Baltic, across northern Poland, and in Arctic training scenarios designed to test both human endurance and aircraft reliability. Their presence became a constant reminder that Sweden was no longer operating in isolation. If Russian aircraft approached Allied airspace, Swedish jets were now among the first to respond. Parallel to military action, Sweden's industrial capabilities emerged as a surprising force multiplier. Its defense sector, long viewed as efficient but modest in scale, proved capable of rapid adaptation. The Loki counter-drone system is only one example. Sweden's broader industrial network supports electronic warfare development, advanced radar manufacturing, and significant drone research. These capabilities provide NATO with a partner that can supplement innovation in ways larger members sometimes struggle to achieve. For older British viewers who recall the era of the UK's own heavy defence manufacturing, Sweden's rise might prompt reflection on how smaller nations can still punch well above their weight. It is worth asking, does Sweden's approach represent a model for future European defense, lean, adaptive, and technologically oriented, or does it risk pulling Europe toward a more confrontational stance with Moscow? For Russia, the combined effect of Swedish military deployment and industrial dynamism is a worrying development. Its own air and naval forces now face a better integrated NATO presence, particularly in the Baltic and Arctic regions. Gripens operating from Sweden's dispersed bases challenge Russian assumptions about rapid control of Baltic skies. Swedish warships tighten the maritime environment, and surveillance upgrades restrict opportunities for covert movement. In other words, what was once a comfortable operating space for Moscow is now a contested zone. Sweden's role is not secondary, it is central. This situation is particularly striking given Sweden's small population and historically modest defense posture. Yet its impact has been outsized, reshaping how Europe thinks about deterrence. As Europe continues evolving in response to shifting threats, Sweden's accelerated integration into NATO has raised fundamental questions about security, strategy, and the future of the continent. Should Europe welcome Sweden's assertiveness as a stabilizing factor, or should it be concerned that such rapid militarization could escalate tensions further? Your thoughts matter here. Do you believe Sweden's transformation strengthens European defense, or does it introduce new uncertainties for the years ahead? The more Sweden asserted itself across NATO's northern flank, the clearer it became that this was not a temporary adjustment, but a long-term strategic repositioning. The shift had consequences far beyond the immediate Baltic region. It reshaped Europe's understanding of what modern power looks like, and just how quickly a nation can redefine its role when circumstances demand it. For much of the modern era, Sweden was known for its diplomacy, its welfare state, and its preference for staying outside major alliances. Its neutrality was not simply a policy, it formed part of the national identity. Yet the events of 2024 and 2025 demonstrated that identity can change under sufficient pressure. Russia's actions in Ukraine did not only frighten the Baltics or Eastern Europeans, they forced even historically distant nations to consider whether old assumptions about safety still held true. One of the most interesting parts of Sweden's transformation is how seamlessly it combined its existing strengths with new commitments. Sweden had long invested in high-quality engineering and defense innovation, but within NATO, these innovations gained new relevance. The Gripen, once dismissed by some as a lightweight European fighter, became central to the alliance's new posture, and its performance in July 2025, during that short but decisive Thai-Cambodian conflict, gave the aircraft a level of legitimacy that no exercise or simulation could provide. Across those 5 days, from July 24th to July 28th, Thai pilots demonstrated that the Gripen could operate effectively in harsh weather, uneven terrain, and intense operational tempo. Cambodian artillery positions, previously difficult to target precisely, were neutralized by laser-guided munitions. This not only bolstered Thailand's position on the battlefield, but also sent a message to procurement departments worldwide. The Gripen works when it matters. As the conflict ended with a ceasefire on July 28, 2025, attention in Europe began to shift. If the Gripen could perform this well, far from home, how much more effective would it be in the Baltic or Arctic, regions it was specifically designed for? Some European analysts even suggested that Swedish aircraft could challenge long-held assumptions about air power economics. Did Europe really need to rely so heavily on a single, extremely expensive platform like the F-35? Or could a combination of aircraft, including the Gripen, provide more flexibility at a lower cost? This is not to say that the Gripen replaces the F-35. Each platform serves a different purpose. But the Gripen's combat debut complicated old debates, especially among countries with limited budgets. Nations such as Colombia and the Philippines began reassessing their earlier hesitations. Even within Europe, quiet discussions emerged about whether lower-cost fighters might allow NATO to expand its operational coverage more efficiently. For a continent where defense spending has historically lagged, these discussions are not trivial. Meanwhile, another development added complexity to the strategic environment. As mentioned earlier, in September 2025, Ukraine publicly expressed hope of receiving Gripen aircraft. Even without a confirmed transfer, this announcement stirred significant concern in Moscow. Russia's military planners, already stretched by the ongoing situation in Donbass and other contested regions, were forced to consider what a more advanced Ukrainian air force might mean. If Ukraine operated a mix of Western aircraft, including F-16s and potentially Gripens, the challenge to Russian air dominance would be substantial. Sweden carefully avoided committing to immediate deliveries. Defense Minister Paul Johnson stated that any future transfer would be long-term and focused on post-war reconstruction. Yet Stockholm had already approved $214 million worth of Gripen-related spare parts, signaling that it was willing to support Ukraine's air capabilities. Even this level of support changed dynamics. In strategic terms, the uncertainty alone created pressure on Russia. Imagine being forced to plan for aircraft that may or may not appear, but must be accounted for regardless. That in itself is a form of deterrence. All of this occurred against the backdrop of Sweden's increasing presence in NATO operations. Gripens conducted joint missions alongside F-35s, Eurofighters, and other Western aircraft. Swedish naval vessels expanded surveillance and protection missions in the Baltic Sea, and in the Arctic, an emerging flashpoint due to climate change and competition for resources. Swedish units trained intensively with Finnish, Norwegian, and American forces. Sweden insisted that it was not seeking confrontation, but its preparations left little doubt that it was ready to defend NATO territory if needed. Perhaps the most revealing element of Sweden's rise is the speed at which it has modernized its defensive posture. The rapid deployment of the Loki counter-drone system in only 84 days showcased a defense industry capable of moving faster than many of its larger NATO counterparts. In an age where drones, electronic warfare, and rapid technological adaptation define the battlefield, speed is no longer a luxury, it is a requirement. Russia, of course, has followed these developments closely. For Moscow, Sweden's entry into NATO was already a strategic setback, but the scale of Sweden's involvement, the air patrols, the naval deployments, the defense spending increases, has compounded the problem. The Baltic Sea, once an area where Russia enjoyed relative freedom, is now densely monitored and heavily defended. The Arctic is no longer insulated from NATO's presence, and Swedish Gripens, combat-tested and supported by a flexible industrial base, present an unexpected obstacle to Russian ambitions. This raises important questions. Is Russia now facing a more unified and technologically capable northern flank than at any time in recent history? Could Sweden's involvement deter escalation, or might it provoke new tensions? These are not theoretical issues. They influence how military planners in London, Brussels, and Washington think about the coming decade. Zooming out, one can see how Sweden's transformation illustrates a broader lesson for Europe. Power in the 21st century is not just about size. It is about adaptability, innovation, and the willingness to act when the strategic environment changes. Sweden may have a population of only 10 million, but its impact on NATO's force posture has been substantial. It demonstrates that even smaller nations can redefine regional dynamics if they combine technology with decisive political choices. And what of the Gripen itself? After decades of questions, doubts, and comparisons to larger aircraft, the jet has finally earned the one credential that cannot be manufactured: combat experience. Its operations in Thailand in 2025, combined with its expanding role in NATO missions, have placed it firmly within the ranks of respected modern fighters. Whether or not more nations choose to adopt it, the aircraft has already altered perceptions across the globe. As Europe looks ahead, Sweden's role will likely expand further. Its planned defense spending increase to 3.1% of GDP by 2028 suggests long-term commitment. Its strategic location gives NATO new depth in both the Baltic and Arctic theatre, and its willingness to innovate rapidly may push other European nations to rethink slow, bureaucratic defense practices. The story of Sweden and the Gripen is not simply about one jet or one nation. It is about how quickly the geopolitical landscape can shift, and how those shifts force countries to reconsider what they once believed was stable. For viewers in the UK, particularly those who lived through earlier periods of European tension, this moment may feel both familiar and unprecedented. Familiar because the continent has seen great power competition before, unprecedented because of how fast the rules are changing. So, what do you think? Has Sweden's transformation made Europe safer, or has it introduced a new layer of unpredictability in an already fragile environment? And how should NATO and the UK respond to this rapidly evolving northern front? The discussion is yours. Thank you for watching this deep dive into Sweden's remarkable rise and the Gripen's journey from theory to real combat performance. If you enjoyed the analysis and want more content that explores how technology, strategy, and global politics shape our world, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly helps us grow and continue bringing you thoughtful, well-researched discussions. I'd love to hear your perspective as well. Here are a few questions to keep the conversation going. Do you think Sweden's rapid transformation strengthens Europe's overall security, or does it raise new concerns for the region? After seeing the Gripen prove itself in real combat, do you believe more nations should consider adopting cost-effective fighters instead of relying solely on expensive platforms? How do you see NATO's northern front evolving in the next 5 years, especially with Sweden and Finland now fully integrated? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Your insights always add real value to this community. Thank you again for being here. Wishing you a great day ahead and see you in the next video.